This is the beginning of a rebellion against the leadership of Moshe. Immediately, the Torah describes that what happens when Moshe is encountered, it's Vayipul al Paneim. Both Moshe and Aaron are both present, and it says they fall on their face. And they say, they say the God of the spirit of all flesh. But what happens is that when they're encountered and they were confronted with this rebellion, their first reaction is that they fall on their face. They fall on their face. What does this mean? So Rashi classically writes in the name of the Medrash that it means that Moshe almost is a bit in despair. He says, there was one rebellion, another rebellion, the story of the spies, and other stories, and the story of the water, and then complaining, and this is going to be too much. Others write, other Rishonim write, like the Rashbam or the Even Ezer, write that it was L'tfila, that that when it says that he fell on his face, it's a form of prayer, a form of davening. Or like the Even Ezer says, maybe a form of prophecy, like it says that the prophet would enter into a state of prophecy, would fall down, at least the lower level of prophets. The Zohar has an interesting interpretation, which you have to understand, a very deep interpretation of what this means, that the falling on the face, falling down, putting the face to the ground. And this has to do, we'll read a little bit of the Zohar, but this has to do with this idea that sometimes, in order to help somebody, to listen to somebody, to see a person's complaint, whether it's about you or in general about life, or to allow a person, through giving them advice, allow a person to see it differently or to experience differently, sometimes words fail. Sometimes it's not about the words that you say, and words will not help. Sometimes words are helpful. But sometimes, more than words is to identify. You have to identify with the person's problem, or identify with the person's challenges, or the trials that the person is going through. But let's see what the Zohar says. Come and see. What does it mean that they fell on their face? This means come and see. The language of the Zohar is always come and see, not come and hear like the language of the Gemara. Come and see, which is a vision, it's hard to see it. Moshe and Aaron sacrificed their life to the place called death, or to the idea of death. They experienced a form of death. That they fell on their face was a form of dying. They said that Kel Elokei is the God, the mighty God, the God of all spirit, of all flesh. So the Rucha is Ksiv Chaser Vav. The word Rucha is spirit, wind, is written without the letter Vav. Ubegin Kachilan de Maisu. This refers to the tree of death. Just like there is the tree of life, the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life, there's also something that's called the tree of death. This is what the Zohar describes often, that there's the tree of life, of giving, of possibility, of hope, of future, of freedom, of life, of creativity. And there's also the opposite of the tree of life, which is the tree of death. There's also another type of tree, which the Ishbitz Tzaddikim talk about, which is the tree of Ilan Desveika, the tree of doubt, which is in between the tree of life and the tree of death. But when it says Ruchos without a Vav, Vav means and, to add, Vi'at, and you shall. So when the letter Vav comes in the beginning of a word, means it's an added. A Vav literally means a hook. Vavim, a hook that connects two things. So when the word Ruchos doesn't have the letter Vav, it means it doesn't have life. It doesn't have and. It's not furthering things. What does it have? It has the idea of the tree of death. And the Zohar continues and says, and every time a person experiences Nefilas Apayim, a person puts down their head in a posture of prayer, they're connected to this place, to the tree of death. And this is what it says. This is what it says. That every day the book of Tehillim in the chapter 7, the book of Tehillim says, the book of Psalms says, that Kel, the God of might, the power, is Zoyim B'chol Yoim, has wrath, anger every single day. That every day there's divine anger, as it were. Or it says, Kirega Ba'apay, there's a one moment of anger. There's one moment of anger. Even though this pasuk says, Zel Kol HaYoim, B'chol Yoim, the whole day. Elokei HaRuchos, the ino aset tzor nishmasen d'amo, v'chol nishmasen tamen salkim v'tamen asyon. This is the place of the source of souls. That at night, like the Ramak reads the Zohar, at night the souls return to this place, and the soul comes from this place. This is the place of Malchus. This is the place of where the souls return, the place of death, the place of sleep. This is what the Zohar says. So what is the Zohar saying? The Zohar is talking about Nefilas Apayim, the idea of falling on your face, which is something that we practice every single day. After we finish Shemona Esrei, after we finish the Midat Tefillah, we also say we put down our heads. We put our heads down on our not completely on the ground, but we put our heads on our left hand. If we're wearing tefillin on the left hand, we put it on the right hand, but really it should be on the left hand. That's why during Mincha we put it on the left hand, which means going to the place of smile, the place of the left, the dark side, or the place of death and sleep. And we do Nefilas Maya, and we recite a certain tefillah, a certain chapter of Psalms, and it's debated which chapter we do, but we recite a certain chapter of Psalms, and we say penitence. This is Nefilas Apayim. So what the Zohar is saying, just to get the word straight, to understand a little what this means, what the Zohar is saying is that there's an idea of falling on your face, falling on the left side, falling down, and the falling down, what the idea of falling down on the face or putting down your head, almost like in a state of falling, represents entering into the dark side, into the murky side, into the place of death or the place of sleep, which is a form of death, is Echad B'Shishim B'Misa, 1/60th of death, to enter in that place. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu was practicing. What he was doing, he was entering into that dark, opaque, ambiguous place. Why did he do this, and what is the intention? So to understand this a little bit better, we have to read a little bit more what the Arizal writes. So the Holy Ari writes in Pri Etz Chaim, Shar Nefilas Apayim. So the Ari speaks about this idea of Nefilas Apayim, what we were supposed to do after Shemona Esrei, and it says that the idea is that we're going from a place of Atzilus, from the place of a pristine state, the highest level of our consciousness, of our soul, and we have to enter, we have to drop, we have to fall to the place, we fall from the highest place of Atzilus, from the highest inner place of wholeness that we are, to the lowest, until the lowest place of the material world. This is symbolic of a person that falls from the roof and falls to the ground. And the intention is that the person that's doing the birurim, the person that's doing this elevation, goes into, he brings down also a Ma'aser Chazal, that the tzaddikim go to the place after death, the place of death, they go to the place of Gehenna, to the place of the ultimate abyss, and they hold the wicked and they draw out the wicked souls from that place. A person, when they fall in the Nefilas Apayim, when they do this tefillah, when this prayer, they have to have an intention that they're giving themselves over to the place of death, and they're giving that they're dying. That they should have intention that they're going to the place of Misa, to the place of death. And when you go to that place, there's an elevation, and then Ari says that through that, then Hashem gives you tremendous blessings and tremendous elevation. But he says that in order to do this type of birurim, this type of elevation, a person has to be on a high level of tzaddik gomer, a high level of perfection, because if not, when you enter the place of the klippa, the place of the concealment, the place of the darkness, To elevate, not only not only were you not able to elevate what you have to be doing there, on the contrary, you'll end up being in a lower place and you end up falling. What is the Zohar saying? I mean, what is the Zohar saying? What is the Priyatz Chaim saying? What actually are we talking about? When a person is, keep for a moment the idea of a tzaddik gomer necessarily aside, that person is a perfect tzaddik. When a person wants to help somebody, the idea in Nefilas Apayim of falling on the face is to enter into the belly of the beast, to enter into the place of the opaqueness, in the place of the ambiguity, in the place of the darkness, and to elevate the sparks that exist within that dense place. Because when a person, when let's take it on a very simple level, if someone comes to you and wants your help, someone reaches out to you. So when the person that's reaching out is not necessarily in a terrible place. So sometimes the way to elevate this person and to bring a person a new perspective and a new angle of seeing this thing and a new way of observing and a new way to get themselves out of their stuck situation is to speak to them, to show them another way of being. But sometimes, however, a person is so stuck and so in a place of klipa, and so in a place of darkness, and so in a place of Elan Nemaisa, a place of the tree of death, that they don't see any other possibility. And logic and speaking to them is not a way to extricate them to get them out of their place. Because that's just another layer of information. That's not the way a person will really get them out. The way to get a person out of that situation is you have to start identifying with the other person's problem. When someone tells you something, I did this terrible thing, or I'm really stuck in this very terrible rut, and I need a tikkun for it. I need some type of elevation, some type of help to get out of the situation. If you are completely unrelated to that issue, then there's no way for you to identify with that problem that the person is going through, and therefore there's no way for you to help that other person. The only way you can help that other person is if you can identify with their problem. But what happens if a person comes to you and did something really terrible, and you try to speak to them and try to explain them to get out of the situation, and you don't. So the only way to do that is to identify with them. So the problem is that when you're yored l'makam hamisa, when you go to the place of this death and this darkness, if you're not an elevated person, then what it's going to do is it's going to bring you down. If the person is talking to you about their challenges, the negative challenges that they have in their life, and it's something that's not familiar to you, so you say, okay, let me try to identify with this issue. Let me try to hear this person out and try to really experience what this person is experiencing. If you get and you really open yourself up to that, what it could end up being is you just get sucked into the other person's reality, and instead of elevating the other person pulls you down. So this is what, in the language of the Ari says that it's, for example, a person that's falling from the rooftop and falling to the ground, falling from the roof to the ground. That's only if you feel yourself, you're on the roof, and you feel like if I'm identifying with this issue, it's actually as if I'm going into the place of falling off the roof and going into the ground. But if you're not falling off the roof, which means if you're not feeling the experience of the other person's negativity and the place of that person's darkness as something that's a fall for you, but for you, okay, so fine, that's something that he did, and I can identify with that issue, then you cannot really help him. The only way to help him is that if you yourself, and every person has to know for their own issues what they feel like in their own life, to have some level of a tzaddik gomer, some level of perfection and wholeness, that this issue is so foreign to me that when I enter into this place, I feel dirtied. I feel muddied. I feel like I'm falling from the roof, I'm falling to the ground. If I can experience that, then that is a positive thing, because then you should do that. If you feel like by identifying with the other person's issues that they're going through, their struggles and their hardships and their darkness maybe, and their real darkness that they're going through, a really lot of the most, a really place of their darkness that they're going through, and you can help them by identifying with that, but you actually feel dirty by the experience. You feel like you're being pulled down from the experience. You were first on the roof, and now you feel like you fell deeply into the ground. That is a Mesiras Nefesh. That's a self-sacrifice that you should do and could do to help the other person. But that's only so long as you feel it as a mysterious nefesh, you feel it as self-sacrifice that you fell from the roof. But if you identify with that issue and you feel close to that issue, then what it's going to do is going to fall down. Let's go back to what the Zohar is saying in terms of this experience. Korach and this group of rebellious people come to Moshe, and they have a lot of tinus, they have a lot of grievances against Moshe. And they even they accuse him of adultery, and they're laying very thick things against Moshe. And Moshe, who is they say, why you're arrogant, and the definition of Moshe is that the Torah describes Moshe is an anamikal adam, that he's the humblest of people. And some of Parsha, like Yakar says, that's actually why he falls on his face. He falls on his face, which is symbolic of the idea, you're telling me that I'm arrogant, I'm like nothing, I'm like the ground. But really, what this really means is they're coming and they're touching, they're speaking to Moshe, they're choshid Moshe, they're accused Moshe of things that Moshe has no relationship to. Moshe Rabbeinu is parish me'ishtoi, but Moshe Rabbeinu is someone that left his wife, or was removed himself from his wife because he had nothing to do with ma'ayli basar. He has no connection to flesh anymore, and they're chashtu be'eshes, and that's specifically the issue that they're accusing him that he's committing adultery, and they're accusing him that he's arrogant, and the definition of Moshe Rabbeinu is that he's humble. And Moshe says, I don't know what you want from me. There's something bothering you. Obviously, this is not about me. It's about you, and it's always about the other. It's never about you. You should always know that when someone's complaining about you, it's never about you, or else you did something wrong. But generally, it's a perception of the other person about you. And Moshe says, I know something is bothering you. You're in a place of very deep klipa. There's something very stuck in your life, maybe tremendous amounts of jealousy. There's something very dark here, and I know in conversation I can't speak to you. In fact, Moshe Rabbeinu does try to speak to them, and they say, "Lo nala, we're not going to have a conversation with you," which means Moshe knows that there's an impossibility for Moshe to speak them out of their problem. So Moshe goes in Mesiras Nefesh. What's the Mesiras Nefesh of Moshe? Moshe goes in self-sacrifice. He experiences Nefilas Apayim. He jumps off the roof and he falls into the ground, which means he wants to experience what they're experiencing. He wants to feel their darkness. He wants to experience the place of Misa, the place of darkness, the place of separation, the place of descent, the place where things are murky and ambiguous, and maybe a place full of jealousy and arrogance and ego. He wants to go to that place. Why? He knows that for him this is a tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. He knows for him this is a tremendous self-sacrifice because he's transcendent of all these things. He's on top of the roof. But he goes in Mesiras Nefesh, he goes in self-sacrifice, and he throws himself off the roof, so to speak, and he goes into the karka, into the belly of the darkness, because that's the way that he can identify with their issue. Some even write that, the Mashchach writes that the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu breaks the luchas, for example, which seems to be symbolic of the idea of anger, because when they served idols, by making the golden calf, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I want to identify with that issue. Otherwise, I don't know what their problem is. I don't know what they're struggling with. And kol hakoyes kil oivil hazara, a person that shows anger is like an idol worshiper. The Zohar says, the Rambam brings it down. There's a version of this also in the Gemara and Shabbos. So the idea is that Moshe Rabbeinu experiences some type of idol worship, and that's why Moshe can identify with their issues. And that's tremendous Mesiras Nefesh, not because Moshe wants to do it, not because Moshe there's an equivalent, God forbid, between this and Moshe. Because on the opposite, Moshe is on the roof and that's the ground. But that's the Mesiras Nefesh, that's the self-sacrifice. The self-sacrifice is, how could I identify, how could I find something within myself? How could I go into the Levush HaMavara? How could I go into the garments of the person that's struggling with these issues? How could I enter into their own consciousness? How could I fully identify with their problem? I am beyond the problem. I don't have these issues, and I'm transcendent of these issues. I know that I'm a tzaddik gomer in these issues, whether fully a tzaddik gomer, a complete righteous person, or with these issues, and someone comes to you to speak about these issues that are completely foreign to you. For you, you're on the roof, and that's totally in the ground, and in the depth of Shel Tachtis, in the depth of the abyss. And what Moshe is saying is, I know that I don't have any of these things that you're accusing me of. I don't understand where you're coming from, but I want to identify with you, and I want to elevate you. I want to go to the place where you're experiencing your own darkness. Vayipol al Pneim, they fall on their face. He experiences a practice of Nefilas Apayim. He falls on his face, and that's the way he can go to the Levush HaMavara, to the garments of the person that's needed to be elevated, and then he can understand, and he can identify, and then he can excrete them, and then he can elevate them, like the Ari writes. He can elevate them from Asiyah to Yitzir to Bria to Atzilus. He can elevate them step by step, one level at a time. The identification. This is the idea of truly helping another individual person. So to say it very, very simple and a very reduced level, and bring it down 1,000 states, this means very, very simple. When someone comes to you and needs advice, or is hurting and is in pain and is experiencing a darkness in their life, the first thing to do is try to help them, of course. Now, if you feel like words cannot help, of course, a hug or a physical connection, of course, can help. But the way to do this and the way to really help another person is you have to have some type of identification with their issue. You have to identify with it. And here's where you have to know for yourself. If this is something that is foreign to you, and this is something that for you, you feel like you're on the roof, and this thing is shaltach, this is the depth of the abyss. Sometimes you have to go on Mesiras Nefesh. You say, I'm going to try to put my own consciousness, my own self, into that place of the Levush HaMevar, even though I feel muddied and I feel dirty and I feel like it's dark and I feel that it's murky and it's unholy and it's unpleasant and it feels uncomfortable. I'm going to enter into that place because I know, because it is uncomfortable, because it feels like to me that's not the space that I want to be in, but I'm entering into the place because I need to feel what you're experiencing, and then I can help you. And that's the Mesiras Nefesh, that's the self-sacrifice. But of course, it has to be done with a lot of intention and presence, and therefore it's with a lot of mindfulness and a lot of intention. That's one way to do it, if you could enter it. And then the other thing is to know that if someone comes to you and is speaking to you about a particular issue that they're going through, and it's something that you identify too much with it because you're also going through that same struggle, you're also going through that same issue, by listening and opening yourself up to the other person's issues, what it's going to do is it's going to pull you further down. So that's just the way, a barometer for your own self and your own spiritual self, how to know when and where a person should be helped and how a person should help, or maybe you're not the right person to help this other person. Anyways, this is what the Torah is telling us. By Yipul al Panim, the Moshe falls on his face. Moshe wanted to enter into the place of the Lon and the Moshe. Moshe went to Mesiras Nefesh, into tremendous self-sacrifice, to go into the place of the darkness, to go into the place where there's deceit and there's jealousy, to understand what is it that's bothering these people, and to enter into Mesiras Nefesh, try to identify with them, with their souls, and somehow to excavate them and elevate them, also to bring them to a place of Kedusha, to a place of holiness. Have a wonderful Shabbos.